Hey, it's Amethyst Virgo. This video is about moon transits. I highly suggest you pick a month and track the moon through your houses and really see how the moon interacts with the rest of your chart, how the moon impacts that house, how the moon aspects other natal chart placements. So the moon moves every 2.5 days. I'll talk more about this in the video, but because of that is the easiest one for us to identify and see times where we might feel differently, where our moods might change, where we might be more inspired to do certain things. There's so many ways in which the moon transit impact our daily lives, okay? So watch the video, check it out, and I definitely challenge everybody to start to track moon placements, moon transit throughout your chart, and find ways to use that moon energy to plan some of the aspects of your life. So we're going to talk about moon transits, tracking the moon. So every time the moon is in a particular sign, it will always be in the same house in your transit. Okay, so Gemini rules your 10th house. Every time the moon's in Gemini, it's going to be in your 10th house. Sagittarius rules your 4th house. Every time the moon's in Sagittarius, it's moving through your 4th house, and so forth. Now, it can get the video that I'm probably going to attach to this video will show you if you use Placidus, it becomes different because let's say you have, Gemini starts at the 5th degree in you're using Placidus, the 5th degree in your chart, right? Gemini is at the 5th degree of your 5th house, but Gemini shows up again because you have an interception. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can probably fast forward. But some of you know what I'm talking about. Like if you have Gemini twice on the cusps of the houses because you have an interception in your chart, what's going to happen is if it's 5 degrees Gemini in the 5th house and then your 6th house starts at 25 degrees Gemini, that means when the moon is in Gemini at the 25th degree or above, it's going to be in your 6th house. But when it's below that, it's going to be in your 5th house. So if you choose to use Placidus, some people do, some people use whole signs, you can notice that difference. But the major point is that you can kind of start to track this a little bit more because the moon moves through all the signs throughout the month. And so you're going to start to see some of those themes. Now remember, the moon is not the sun. The sun has more of those shedding light, right? You can see the themes. They're more in your face. The moon sometimes can be harder for some people because remember, it is internal. So it can often deal a lot with your internal process, how you are reflecting, how you are connecting with people who are in the situation as well. So the moon transits require you to do a little bit more of that inner thought, right? Oh, I did this. How was I feeling when I did that? Or why do I feel different from this day to this day? Those of you ruled by the moon, those of you who have moon in the 4th house, or you have moon aspects that create a theme, you may notice that it impacts you a little bit more. Remember, the moon changes every 2 to 3 days. There are plenty of really great moon apps that can show you the transits, and it has a huge impact on our daily life, right? So the sun, of course, moves about, I believe it's 1 to 2 degrees each day, but the moon is the fastest moving planetary body. So that is why sometimes I know that I am influenced by the moon. I know because my moon's in the 4th house. I can sense it. During certain moon cycles, I'm more productive. I'm more creative. I have more energy. Some moon cycles, I notice I get sick more. Some moon cycles, I don't really get sick all that much, but that moon's in Virgo in my 1st house. Sometimes that happens. Or any major sickness I have, I typically notice that transit. Sometimes when the moon's in Aquarius in my 6th house, I'm more likely to do things I typically don't feel like doing. I feel more in the mood. Oh, I've been putting that off for a while. Let me go do it, right? So it has a big impact on some of us, okay? The moon is more complex because there are also moon cycles. The waning moon, the waxing moon, a full moon, a new moon, right? A quarter moon. Like we have, there's the moon cycles, and I do have a video about the moon cycles if you want to check that out if you haven't seen it. So the moon transiting the 1st house. If the moon is transiting the 1st house, now again, signs will be different. And maybe I'll do a video about the signs. Maybe I'll do a video later. Speaking up for how situations affect you is more likely. So this isn't about being seen like the sun. The moon in the 1st house is, I'm now impacted by something emotionally enough that I am now asserting myself. There may be times where someone who's more reserved feels compelled to speak up for what has been bothering them or what excites you. The moon doesn't always have to be, oh, I'm in a bad mood. The moon can also be what inspires you. Maybe your moon is in, Sagittarius in the first house. Is what's transiting the first house. And once that hits, you feel more compelled to speak your truths. That you notice and you track, you're like, wow, I'm more likely to speak up during meetings and to share my insights when the moon is in the first house, right? So it will vary by person, but you may feel more confident, but your confidence is not the shell of the sun. Your confidence is going to be the inner need. My inner needs need to be expressed. People who natally have the moon in the first house already know what this may feel like, okay? But you will also more easily people will see you as responsive to your own needs at that particular time. Now, the moon is transiting your second house. You may be more aware of your value at this time, especially internally. You may feel compelled to claim what's yours. You may be relatively protective during this transit of what you have, of what matters to you, right? You might invest in what you care about at this time. And really aligning the activities that help you feel self-value, right? This can be a great time if you've been missing certain things, you've been putting everyone else first, you haven't even been looking at what you need and what you want. And maybe you start planning for a trip now. You start evaluating the things that you have. You start, taking time to say, you know what? I'm going to just enjoy what I have already earned, or I'm going to plan. Now, again, taking the actual trip would not be the second house activity, but maybe the second house, you're starting to be more internally invested in something. Maybe you're starting to plant the seeds towards something that's going to help you in the long run. But this is a great time to reflect and do that inner work around your own value. What do I possess? What do I have? What do I need? Your needs can also be magnified at this time as well. In terms of financial safety, financial security, really taking that time to do a lot of those types of, tasks and activities that sometimes we miss, right? The second house is not a house like that people tend to talk a lot about. The second house, oh, my house of money, moving on. But when we really think of the second house, it's really important to help you understand how you function. How do you gain, gaining money from what we do, gaining things, having things is a part of life. And so when the moon is there, it becomes more important for you to connect to the things that really matter. And so if you've been avoiding that, you want to, during that time, evaluate and investigate a little bit more. Now, the moon transiting the third house can mean information can cause you to be more curious. So remember, the moon is going to stir something up. It is, it's something that's coming out in terms of, now again, it will depend on the sign and the person. But remember, the moon, what you want to do when you're reflecting is you're not being scared of what you see. A lot of times we don't want to reflect. We don't want to think about, I feel this negative feeling, or I feel this thing, but I don't want to show people this, so let me ignore this feeling. The moon is very important to help us really decipher the things that we need to understand about how we are responding to the world around us. And so with this case, you can be more sensitive, though, to the information you receive. If you're a moon in Pisces, if you have Pisces, not moon in Pisces, well, if you have the third house, Pisces is in your third house, and the moon transits there, it's very important for you to watch how you speak to this person during this time, because this person is going to be a little bit more, even if they're usually a very logical, rational person, that moon transits into their third house of Pisces, and now you notice that they are internalizing things more. They're taking it more personal. Well, why? It can be these transits, and that's why sometimes people can feel inconsistent to us. It's these transits. But depending on the sign, some may be more communicative. There can be people at this time that feel like, I need to get it off my chest. They get to say what I feel. But others can be more private during this transit. If you have a moon in Scorpio, like if the Scorpio moon transits your third house, maybe you are more investigating, you're researching, you are feeling more, inclined to get information on your own. Whereas if someone has a moon in Gemini or a moon in Sagittarius or a moon in Leo or something, there can be more of this I need to say something. I need to tell you this feeling that I'm having at this time. The moon transiting your fourth house will mean family matters or emotional issues will be significant. Now, here's what we have to be careful about. Everything with the moon is not going to be big and seen. You could have a fleeting feeling. Remember, the moon transits every 2 to 3 days. 2.5 days, give or take, right? So, and this means that it could be very possible that you just feel a way. Nothing happens tremendously, but your mood is different. the way you're internalizing things, the way you're feeling, the way it's like sometimes people don't even notice our mood shifts, or people don't know internally what's going on with us. So that's why the moon is a little bit of a different animal, because we are dealing with the internal process. And depending on your signs, your aspects, your natural disposition, your chart, that's going to indicate, does that moon energy come out? Is it obvious to people, or is the moon more so shown through the way in which you do things, right? It's the why you do things. So you could feel more influenced emotionally. Maybe you don't express it, but maybe at this time you feel nostalgic. You feel that you're thinking a lot about the past. Maybe you feel more connected to your family at this time. Or maybe with the moon being in the 4th house, maybe you have it squaring your Pluto in your natal chart, and you feel more, you think a lot about things that have happened in your life that have been difficult, right? Again, this is a general overview, but when the moon is transiting that 4th house, there's themes there. So you also may feel more protective over yourself or others, over needs. I'm protective over needs. Now, the person who notices, I have an example here, and I said the person who notices is that they are more prone to visit their sick grandmother during this time. Sometimes when you start to track your behaviors, you think you have this routine that is based on logic, but sometimes our routines are actually based on transits or moon energy. What we're more likely to do, I'm telling you, if you start tracking, it's going to be an amazing thing. Now, you may feel a burst of energy, of creative energy during this time. Doing something that makes you feel happy without any gain attached is helpful to allowing this. 5th house is joy. Think about it as like childlike joy, okay? The 5th house is all the things we like. It's the house that is with the things we like, that we enjoy, that are happy, that bring us happiness, of course, pleasures and things like that. So when the moon transits your 5th house, it is time to do something that makes you feel good. Remember I talked about the moon in the 2nd house, time to find your value, center yourself, right? You keep going. In the 2nd house, let's evaluate what you have. Let's evaluate what you need. Maybe you're ignoring your own needs. But with here, there's a connection to fun, to children, to activities. Even people with meeting new people, dating, things like that. Remember, the 5th house is everything that is lighthearted. It's fun. Others feel a need to connect to loved ones in more engaging ways, right? So remember, the moon is our connectivity. So 5th house can be people we enjoy being around or people we have fun with. This could be a time where somebody is more likely to want to go out or want to have fun or want to do certain things. So again, the moon moves so fast. It doesn't always mean that everything's going to be captured in that transit, but maybe you start the seed, you plant the seed for certain things, right? During certain transits. The moon being the 6th house, this is obligations, right? The 6th house of obligations, the things we have to do. And so the need to do things that are meaningful can be important at this time, right? You'll feel more connected to self-improvement. You'll have a concentrated sense of responsibility. As I've said earlier in the other slide, I personally, when the moon is in the 6th house, transiting my 6th house, I am more likely to do things I usually don't feel like doing. And that's likely because at that time, the moon is conjunct Jupiter, the moon is conjunct my natal Jupiter when it transits my 6th house. And so I'm more prone to doing things and going, let me go do this, or I've been putting this off for a long time. And because it's Aquarius, it changes the energy, because Aquarius can be unexpected, sudden. It's things that aren't necessarily always with a certain level of it's not an order, right? But because of that, I'm more likely to get that energy to do it. So you are more sensitive also maybe to the needs of other people, but it's not the same sensitivity to emotions as the 4th house. It would be sensitive to, okay, let me go, let me make my kids' doctor's appointments. Let me go do this for this person, right? The 6th house is the house of service. So also it can indicate a time where you're trying to be more of help or service or use to other people. If the moon is transiting your 7th house, this is a great time for evaluating and reflecting on your interpersonal relationships, your connections. And this could be a great time to have heart-to-heart conversations, something that is more equipped to deal with at a time where your sensitivities are heightened. So even if you're a person who's usually not very sentimental or very emotional, it's not even about simply being emotional, but it's about being able to see common ground, or being at that time more prone, especially if certain aspects are aligned with the chart. Let's say your moon at the time And the transiting moon is also somehow, it's trining your natal Jupiter, or it's trining Jupiter in your chart. The transit, regardless of whatever one it's trining, that can also be an indicator. So you might be a person where typically when the moon moves to the 7th house, you don't notice it, but all of a sudden there's a transit and the moon is making an aspect to another planet, and it makes you more open in that time. But again, reflection about the dynamics of your relationships, really evaluating and looking at the quality of your relationships, your marriage, business associations, etc. It can be beyond this idea of the romance, right? A lot of times people only rely on this idea of the 7th house and marriage in partnership, but the 7th house can also represent any type of union coming together, and it can sometimes also represent business. So a person who signs a contract for their business to start, something they've been waiting for a long time, that can sometimes be seen through something like a transit with the moon going through the 7th house. Now, the moon transiting the 8th house, we have to keep in mind that the 8th house is, and for people who have a natal 8th house moon, you already know how intense and deep those emotions go, which is why it's sometimes hard for 8th house moons to fully express the range of what they're feeling, because there can be this assumption that nobody's going to understand it. No one is going to understand the depths of what I feel, and what I feel could be so complicated if I have a moon in the 8th house, because it's attached to all of these deeper underlying experiences and issues that sometimes it's like for the 8th house moon, it's like it's not even worth trying. That's why it's really good for 8th house moon people to connect with others who kind of have that same, I wouldn't say the same history as them, but it is great because they don't want to have to explain so much emotional baggage to other people. So when they meet another person who has a similar story, etc., that sometimes can be the way in which they tend to open up. Now, I would say with this, psychological awareness of your emotions is optimal. This is very important to probe internally, but it's not the same as like, oh, I feel this way today. Why? Because somebody cut me off in traffic, because someone, my friend sent me a text message that was really rude, or I'm mad because so-and-so won't call me back. That is more situations that are right in front of you, right? It's very daily. That could be more of a moon 4th house thing, maybe. You're upset about something, the way someone's treating you, or you're upset about something that's more based on what's in front of you. The 8th house has such a deeper level. Not that the 4th house isn't deep, because the 4th house is equally important, but it is what it is. The 8th house has more of that in, that the underpinnings of everything we've been through. It is trauma, it is psychological, it is how things we feel have manifested, like what is the root behind it. And so because of that, this is a great time to really don't just look at things for face value. When you feel a certain way, you got to travel all the way down into the core of your soul of how you really feel. And this could be a great period for internalization and taking better care over your emotional health, being aware, like, oh, wow, I'm really at my breaking point. I'm really, this is really taking, a toll on me. Like, this is a great time to evaluate those things, not to let it overrun you, but to truly understand it. You prefer deeper connections over superficial ones, especially if this conjuncts any planets. So this could be a time where you're not, sometimes you're not in the mood to deal with certain people, right? Like, I love them, but I'm not in the mood right now. It can be because you are yearning for someone who's going to kind of, that's the irony of the 8th house moon, especially natal, but if it's transiting, is that it's this, I want someone to understand me and go deep into that abyss, go deep into, if you think of a cave, I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper. I can't even see the sunlight anymore. Can't even see daytime. But I also know there's only certain people that can go with me, right? And so this is also a great time to have those bonding moments or those experiences and talk to people that you feel can really give you those deeper answers. Now, the moon transiting the 9th house can be important for any time we are trying to this is not as inner reflective as some of the other moon transits, but you can feel more personally attached to your beliefs at this time. So you are more sensitive to certain criticisms of your truth. You may feel deeply about something. You may be more likely to want and to desire new experiences. You could say, you know what, today I'm going to do something different. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to explore that, or I'm going to go see something that I haven't seen before and get some new awareness. I'm going to, let me take the day and reflect. You know, think about those days that you do random things to learn, to get more knowledge. You know, you think of the person who randomly is like, you know what, let me join my friend at church today. I usually don't do this type of thing because maybe you're not religious, but you're like, let me join my friend. That is, you know, or let me join my friend. Okay, my friend just invited me to this trip. All right, let me do it. Let me go, right? And it may be like, sometimes it's not something you plan to do or that you always tend to do if that's not your pattern, but that is a way in which we sometimes can see this happen. Now, you may feel more of a longing for adventure and make decisions based on a need for fulfillment. So sometimes a transit, we make a decision in a transit that, you know, remember that transit, that moon transit is very quick. So we sometimes make decisions based on transits, and then we have to carry those out, right? You know, with other energies coming in and out. This is also a good time to use your inner knowledge. You know, use your inner knowledge, your inner awareness in order to then experience the things around you. Remember, the ninth house is, I say open houses. That's a term that I use just to talk about houses that are more extroverted, I guess, or houses that have more activity going on that can bring some level of excitement or experiences outside of yourself. The ninth house are experiences that are outside. It is foreign. It is uncharted territory. These are journeys, right? Now, if the moon is transiting your 10th house, well, what we're dealing with here is your emotions are calibrated. And what I mean by that is that you can become sensitive to situations that deal with authority, goals, or ambition. And this could be good if you take on something, you know, a passion project, something that's going to elevate your career, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to do this. Especially if you have, let's say the moon is making a sextile or in some way to another planet in your chart that promotes a positive, you know, experience with this moon energy. You know, if the moon is positively aspected, you may feel satisfied with the direction of your career and opportunities. If it is negatively aspected, you may feel more emotional. You may be like, I'm not an emotional person. But for those 2.5 or 3 days, you feel more sensitive about the direction of where you're going. You may, you know, feel more like questioning or trying to really navigate how you truly feel about the ways in which you are achieving things in life that are big. And that can be really important in terms of understanding what you really want out of your career, out of your goals. The moon can be great to kind of remind us of the importance of navigating our feelings. At any given time, we have feelings, we have emotions, things change, things ebb and flow. Even if you are not an emotional person, you still will be influenced by this energy, which is why it's important to understand how it works. Now, if the moon is transiting the 11th house, again, we're dealing with the 11th house, associations, social networks. We are dealing with groups. We're dealing with themes that have to do with shared ideals, communities that we are a part of, or that we, you know, that we join or that we're invited to. You are more invested in feeling accepted by others at this time. Okay, so don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if, even if you're like an introvert or you're a person that doesn't typically do that, that you feel more like a need to be among other people. And you feel a greater connection at this time, or you're more open to certain things at this time. It doesn't have to mean that you know, it's not gonna, you know, a 2.5, 3 day transit, moon transit, it's not gonna change your, you know, everything. Now, if a moon transit feels very significant, like it's changed your life, typically that is aligned with other energies within the chart. Typically, you're also maybe more likely to join organizations or outings, because it highlights the inner need. We all have an inner need to belong, to be a part of something, to be invited to something. And the sun is different, but the sun is more like you're the focal point, or you are the one that is shining in certain settings. But the moon requires us, and so you might even feel more inclined at this time to be around people more like you, even though the 11th house can sometimes build friendships and shared ideals, or people who maybe come from different backgrounds, but you have a shared ideology, you have a shared way of viewing the world and society. So that could also indicate, you know, a moon is a closeness. I need to feel close to these people because I'm going to feel more accepted if I am. Now, lastly, with the moon transiting the 12th house, you may feel more inclined to feel beneath what is physically in front of you. You know, you might feel like you want to isolate. You might feel like you need to be away. Like, I need to be away from everybody, right? 12th house, escapism, isolation. I need to be away so that I can figure this out. I need to figure everything out right now, what I'm going through. And sometimes, people might go to other people for counsel or something of that nature, but sometimes to get the answer, you have to go. You have to go. And what's interesting is the 12th house is escapism, but in the 12th house is associated with Pisces. The 6th house is associated with Virgo, but Virgo in tarot is the hermit, right? Hermit energy is kind of the 12th, but they are opposite signs, and so Pisces and Virgo share some similarities, despite one being an earth sign, one being a water sign. And so this is a great period to reflect and not self-isolate in order to gather your true feelings undisturbed. The 12th house is great for being undisturbed. Okay, I'm not influenced by what you're saying. The only time 12th house would be is if a person is really, unevolved, they don't have direction, they're going wherever the wind blows, they feel a need to be, belong in something, so they don't have a sense of self or a sense of identification. So sometimes you can see things like that, especially with Piscean, Neptunian type of energy. If it does not have that kind of direction, if it is not fulfilling a certain type of destiny, right? There's sometimes you can see that, but in general, there's a great place to go to be undisturbed. You might deal a lot with the unconscious, beginning to do things that are best for you from a spiritual perspective. Yep, it might be best. Yep, it might be best to do something because you can make money from it, or because you can go, brag about it, or because you can get something from it. But you might, in the moon phase of this, you know what? I don't really need that right now. You know what? Nope, I'm not going to go on that trip right now that they keep inviting me to go to, because I'm not in a good place right now. So I'm going to worry about myself. That is this energy here. For a very sensitive person, this transit can be unsettling. It can ramp up feelings of compassion and empathy. So, of course, I always tell people, this is the basics. This is general. I'll give as many examples as I can. But at the end of the day, we also have to understand what's happening with the whole chart. We have to understand the aspects that are with these planets as well.